Hi and welcome. So glad to have you here today on these elegantly raw tidbits. So, I have something to show you. Look at this. To me, when I see this, I know what I see. What do you see when you see this? Think of it for a moment. Let it be instantaneous. What I see is clutter. Yes, look how tightly woven all these tamarins are together and shoved into a box. To me, clutter is extremely indicative of the way we are seen and treated by a lot of corporations. We're being branded. We're being seen simply as consumers. And I think one of the ways in which we rebel against having been seduced into all this buying, and doing is by actually creating clutter in our own lives. A lot of people have anxiety and fear over being not good enough, over keeping up with the Joneses or whoever, the Clarks or whoever they are now. And it's very interesting because it's simply programming. I think the reason behind all the clutter in our lives, and I also have clutter, mine is paperwork, and it started when I found out that I had to keep all the documents for 7 years because I have my own business that was expected of me. And so I was started being fearful of throwing anything out or recycling any paperwork, because just in case I found that it was necessary and it was needed, and if the IRS wanted me to find something, then I wouldn't have it available. And that's how it started with me. And then I started a nonprofit, and I became very fearful of throwing anything away lest I would need to show documentation for that. And that's how it started. And it's interesting because this kind of fear is very prevalent and is very promoted. So we have created lives of fearful living, fear that we're not good enough, and fear that we're not measuring up, but also fear that we're going to be called on to produce certain documentation just for our lives, that we need documentation. And if we do not have them, or the kind that is needed, we might get into trouble. So I think all clutter has fear at the root at some cause. Now, how to deal with clutter? Well, first of all, I do, yes, definitely commend Marie Kondo in Japan, and I do recommend Marie Kondo, but I don't think that gets to the root cause of it. She does get to very deep causes, however, without realizing it. When she says, ask yourself, does this spark joy? If it doesn't, then you don't need it. I think that's very clever, and it gets the root cause of a lot of problems and a lot of issues regarding clutter. But our minds are cluttered, and I think that's the root cause of it. And that's why meditation is key in addressing clutter. Because meditation is not about sitting still or being completely and totally lost in a different world at all, which some people think it is. A lot of people says, I can't meditate. I'm just too anxious or too nervous or too whatever. But that's exactly the person who needs to be meditating, because meditating is simply a way to set our intention. That's all. If you want to be aware of all the anxiety in your life, all the clutter in your life, just sit in silence for a moment. Sit still in silence and watch your thoughts. And that's meditating. Just sitting in silence and watching your thoughts. So when I was training with Deepak Chopra, Roger Gabriel, and Dr. David Simon to become meditation teacher for the Chopra Center, I loved that we use a lot of mantras. I thought mantras were really important because that allowed us to really tighten up and constrict what we're thinking of, and gave us something to focus on. But focusing on the breath is actually, to me and for me, the healthiest thing that we can do, and the thing that most elicit transformation in our life. If you want to change or create any change in your life, change your breathing pattern, because the breathing pattern is synonymous with the rhythm of the life that creates the problem. We all have a pattern of breathing in our lives, and that pattern of breathing is very consistent with whatever issues that show up in our life, or with any healing that shows up in our life. So we always have to change our pattern of breathing. So you can look everywhere online and you will see a lot of different solutions for clutter, but it doesn't address the mind clutter. For example, it will address the fact that maybe people are just overcommitted and that's why they have clutter, and that's very true. But while you're overcommitted, again, it starts in the mind. The feeling that you have to do this, you must do this, and you haven't learned to set boundaries because you're unable to say no. Again, that's because of mind clutter. If you address the clutter in the mind, you will come to a place of much peace with saying no to others in your life. Some people have clutter because of physical disabilities. Can you imagine being blind and not seeing what's around you? So maybe that can also be a gift, because then you will not accumulate a lot of things. There's also, of course, the fear I spoke about that, but there are also past experiences that are in our lives, and we want to keep memories and we want to keep souvenirs. But the truth of the matter is that these memories exist within us already. They're literally in the cells of our body. So we do not need outward manifestations of any of these memories. We don't need souvenirs. I've never understood people buying souvenirs when they travel. And they say, I hear them say, I want a souvenir of this trip. But it lives within you. If you allow yourself to be moved enough to make any change, small, large, it doesn't matter, because of that trip, that's your souvenir. It's never external souvenirs, they're always internal. So we don't need to clutter with souvenirs either. And then there's the emotional or mental overload in our lives. And most of us, yes, this is definitely a very, very strong reason behind clutter. One of my problems with clutter too is that I'm overloaded with all this junk mail constantly in my box, and then I pile it up and I don't have time to go back and then deal with it, or I feel I don't have the time because I don't think it's deserving of my time. And then it's on overload. So a few years ago, I found out there's an address one could write, and that would stop the clutter of the junk mail descending on us in our homes. And that worked for a while, but now it seems that with a vengeance, it's back. Constant junk mail, not just online in my inbox, in my emails, but also even going on social media, that they pop up and they're constantly in that post box. So we need to find a way to really find ourselves in a place where we say no and make a deliberate no, and where we start returning things. I think we start returning all the clutter to them, they will end up being overly they will be so overly inundated with all of the clutter of all the junk they sold out, because it's all returning to them, that I think they will stop it as well. But it's because we've been seen as, and we have been treated as, and we have been categorized as consumers while we get so much clutter in the mail. And I think that's really the deep underlying cause of so much clutter in our lives, is the belief that we are consumers. So we need to keep this and keep this just in case I need this, or I need to keep this coupon in case I need this. There's no in case. You don't need anything but air, water, and sleep. Now, didn't even say food, because they're breatharians, and breatharians live without food. They are sun gazers, and their breathing habits are really such that they don't need it. Don't need food, but some of us could add food as well. But even with the food, there's clutter. There are people saving up for this, for that, for this, for that, constantly saving up. And then you go into their pantry or in their kitchens, and it's on overload, all that stuff. And most of it is outdated anyway. They have a sell by date. And if you eat according to the laws of nature, and according to which means eating seasonally, so then you won't have clutter in the kitchen either. And if you eat only fresh foods that are uncooked, you won't have clutter either. And you only buy what you need for 2 or 3 days. You know, when I was growing up, we always went every day and bought whatever we needed for the day for food. Every day. And so it was always fresh. And we just used it that day. And the next morning we went and we got more. Why don't we return to this? It's a life of tremendous ease and grace and abundance to live this way. Then, of course, there's the lack of time. You spend so much time commuting to work. You get so much energy expended at work, and then you go back into the traffic again. You come home. Who has time to deal with the clutter? Oh, we are just creating more clutter because when we go home, we just don't have the time to put things away where they need to be. So there's also a change in our life circumstances. Somebody has died, and then we have to go and clean up their own clutter. You know, that to me is a great stimulus to clean up clutter. When you think, I don't want my family having to come in here and clean up this mess behind me, that is one of the most enriching experiences, is to say to yourself, I'm going to die tomorrow. Let me clean up this clutter now, because we're dying every day, whether we realize it or not. The parts of which ourselves we no longer need needs to die. And we need to come alive with a different part of ourselves and be reborn from a different space. And one of the things we need to die to, I think, is the clutter. Then there's also the fear of missing out. Oh, if I don't keep this magazine or this article around, or if I don't have this anymore. You know, one of the things that I used to have clutter was people used to send me a lot, and I mean a lot, of greeting cards. And they were beautiful. And the sentiments in them were so beautiful that I felt that I had to honor them by keeping it. But then it grew and grew and grew and grew. Before I knew, it became almost like a mountain. So now I bless the person. I go through each and every card. I bless the person. I send them a whole pile of thanks straight from my heart. And then I release the card that they sent me. And now that we have e-cards, I think we don't need to really reach out and send these other cards anymore unless it means something to you. But I don't think we need to keep them in our lives for very long. So awareness is actually the first step in cleaning up our clutter and being clutter-free. And we also need to ask ourselves, am I willing to change? Am I willing to give up the clutter for a clutter-free life? Which means, do I wish to create spaciousness in my life for myself and for others? Creating spaciousness in our lives, when we come from that space and that place, it's amazing how quickly and easily it is to clean up and clear out all the unnecessary clutter. So I invite you to take a look at your life today and see what needs to be cleaned out. The thoughts, the belief systems, the patterns of behavior, the people, the things. What needs to be cleaned up in your life? Maybe you need to revolt and say, I'm not a consumer. That is not what I'm here for. Maybe that is enough to clean up the clutter. So I invite you to join me in cleaning up all the clutters of our life, all of them, every single one of them, and free yourself from feeling you have to, must keep, must do. Just allow life to occur without you having to invest any more clutter into it. Thank you for joining me today. See you here. Touch the notification button and the subscribe button for more. And join me in your comments below. Let me know what clutter you wish to clean up, how you intend to go about it, and why you think there's clutter in your life. Until next time.